All right, I see we're some folks are filing in right now, but we do have a little bit of a busy schedule tonight. Welcome everyone to our meeting. It's good to see you all. David, if you could hit the next slide, please. So somebody's got a hot mic out there. Just want to quick rundown of the agenda for tonight. So the first topic of discussion will be about Crape Myrtle pruning program. We've got Ginger Farrell and Stephen from the Ginger Farrell from the Norfolk Master Gardeners and Mr. Stephen Trailer, who is our city forester, to discuss that program. Then we're going to go with Chief Boone and team from Norfolk Police Department to talk about the crime and gun violence in the city. And then Officer Fentress will give us a quick update here in West Ghent regarding some of the latest on like stolen vehicles in the neighborhood and a couple other things that she's interested in discussing. And then I'll close out with some neighborhood updates. David, if you could go to the next slide, please. And Ginger and Stephen, are you out there?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Yep. Good evening.
Well, over to you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Great. So thank you for inviting us out to your Civic League meeting tonight. I'll just go through a couple of brief things before I actually share our presentation. Stephen Trailer is on. He's our city forester. And several years ago, well, actually many years ago, there was legislation that was passed that said people could no longer manage city trees, and crepe myrtles in particular were not to be pruned, were not to be touched. And then the city realized they kind of got out of hand. So the city forester's office at the time reached out to the master gardeners to see if we could put together a program where we could train citizens to manage the trees in the verge, which is between the sidewalk and the curb, or any other public spaces. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is the program that we have as the Master Gardeners in coordination with Stephen Trailer's office of the Office of Forestry. Stephen supports us in all of this. He provides all of the tools, the labor to pick up the cuttings that we've found. And with that, I'd like to share my screen and get into the program. Oh.
Well, I think we can get that up. David, can you share her screen?
Yeah, you should be able to. If you just want to give it a try there, it's set for everybody.
Yeah, I clicked on it, but I get this strange window. It's a webinar on building a masterpiece of positive habits. I don't know where that even came from.
We're seeing your screen.
Oh, well, that doesn't do me much good because I need to read it. Let's see if I can. Are you seeing the actual slides?
Now we are.
Okay. I apologize for this. I thought I had it all set up perfectly.
No worries. I think if you just go to present your slideshow, it should show up just fine.
Well, yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, so up in the left corner of your screen, you see the button from beginning. If you click on that, that'll start the slideshow.
There we go.
Awesome. Thank you.
So Paulette Crawford and myself are the Crape Myrtle Pruning Program project co-leaders on this. And we organize with civic leagues and neighborhoods to train neighbors in the correct way to prune crepe myrtles, things to look out for with crepe myrtles, and how much we love our crepe myrtles. So in 1922, the crepe myrtle was named Norfolk's official tree. Fred Hewitt was the first director of the programs, if you will, and he oversaw the planting of more than 40,000 crepe myrtles throughout the city. Now, through the years, obviously, we've lost some, just they age out, they were damaged, whatever. But we try to replace them when we can. And in 1951, he proposed and organized the Norfolk Crepe Myrtle Festival, which I believe ran until the mid-1960s. So today we have approximately 38 38,000 crepe myrtles along Norfolk City streets, and more than half of the trees that belong to the city are crepe myrtles. So we've got the willow oaks that are fairly common, several other trees, which Stephen can certainly get into. The best thing about the crepe myrtles is they thrive really well here. They're heat and drought tolerant. They're said to have blooms for 100 days. So for most of the hot days in the summer, as our gardens are fading and the grass is turning brown, the crepe myrtles are blooming beautifully. The partnership that we have with Stephen Trailer's organization is to teach city citizens the proper pruning methods, the importance of the proper tree pruning, the Norfolk rules and regarding the care and maintenance of the trees, and the safety precautions. And typically what we do is we reach out to the civic leagues and we ask that you gather your neighbors. We meet typically on a Saturday morning. The events normally last about 3 hours. During that 3 hours, we will instruct the citizens on the proper pruning programs. We typically bring out 10 or so master gardeners, lead small teams up and down your neighborhood streets and address all of the tree issues there. Stephen has also asked us to look out for the other city trees that are in the verge areas or in the medians in some streets, identify any problems that either his office needs to address or things that we can manage. So typically we'll look for trees that are blocking sidewalks, blocking intersections, stop signs that are a danger to people walking on the sidewalks, and we'll address all of those. Our goal as master gardeners is to instruct. So although we lead these teams, we physically show people what the proper way to prune the trees is. Due to COVID-19, we're not handling any projects right now. Of course, as this latest Omicron variant passes and things lighten up and more people are vaccinated, we will probably start pruning again come this spring. The city forester's office provides all of the tools and safety equipment. So they provide loppers and saws, eyewear, protective eyewear, gloves, and they also pick up the limbs that we've trimmed. So Stephen coordinates all of that with us. He typically attends all of the events that we run, and he's out on the street with us, which is just wonderful. And they have provided the basic training to the Master Gardeners organization. So we're fully trained by them, and then it's our job to train citizens. And as I said, you know, Stephen notifies the city regarding the pruned limbs and the suckers that are pruned off. The community volunteers will be led by the Master Gardeners. They'll apply it to the trees in their own landscapes, we hope. Typically, we don't get into how to prune a shrub or how to prune a 60-foot tall willow oak, but we will deal with ornamental trees that you have in your yards. And then we also ask that the volunteers, the community volunteers, care for and maintain the city trees that are adjacent to their property. Obviously, this improves our city and residential landscapes in the process. So here's a before and after picture. This is a crepe myrtle bush on the left here before pruning. The objective is to reduce the number of basic stems so that the tree gets good airflow. Airflow allows the tree to be more healthy. It blooms better. It keeps the insects down, whatever. And it doesn't block the sidewalk or anyone's view. So this is a before and an after. I think this picture was taken 2 summers ago. Or not summer, obviously. People are wearing ski caps, so it must have been in the fall. So on this tree on the left, all of these little shoots that are coming up from the bottom, we refer to as suckers, and they just drain energy out of the tree and take too much water. They typically don't bloom. So the idea here is to thin this out by removing the suckers. Some of the restrictions when we're pruning is you have to have both feet on the ground at all times. We don't want anyone climbing trees or standing on fences or whatever. You can only prune what easily can be reached. One of the tools that Stephen provides are loppers. They're about 3 feet long, so you can easily reach up to the 6 to 9 foot level, and only use hand tools. We don't use any power tools whatsoever. Not only can they be dangerous, but they can get out of control easily and do more damage to the trees than we would like to do. Ideally, we like to do these programs in the winter when they're not blooming, when they're dormant, they're resting, and the branch structure is more visible, readily visible. The suckers at the bottoms of these trees can be removed at any time, and we have several, not only master gardeners, but neighbors who say every time they cut the grass, they just go out with their little hand pruners, or if they're very, very small, you know, maybe 2 or 3 inches, they've just sprouted up from the base of the tree, you can knock them off with your fingers. So, and they should be removed because, as I said, they just drain energy from the tree and absorb water, and it doesn't do any good for the tree. This is a typical tree with suckers. So all of these little green branches at the bottom are the suckers that typically we would trim off. This tree is probably decades old, just based on the size. There's a master gardener down here at the bottom pruning. We also pull off any ivy or any other trees that have worked into the base there. This is another before and after. We've removed all of the suckers from the bottom, which just allows all the energy to go up to the top of the tree where the new blooms are. And again, just another before and after. This, I believe, was done 2 summers ago. We've left something here at the bottom. It looks like it's some sort of a liriope. We encourage people to plant along the verge here. You can see the little sidewalk down here at the corner, and here's the curb. We're encouraging people to plant, take advantage of that space. And as you drive through neighborhoods, you'll see where people have taken advantage of that and put in nice low light flower gardens in there. But again, in order to do that, you need to remove all of these suckers from the bottom. This is Stephen showing someone how to prune a large branch. Obviously, there's been some what we call murder here, where people have just gone in and lopped off branches. Everything should be cut back to the collar on the tree, and that way the bark will naturally just heal over the cut. Stephen's showing us here how to take the cut all the way back to the collar, which is a small growth around the base of a branch, and take off that wood, which eventually will die, dry out, and just allows insects and disease into the main trunks of the tree. Corrective pruning can be done at any time when a problem is detected. If 2 branches are crossing and rubbing and touching each other, they eventually will rub the bark off the trees, which again opens up those branches to disease and insects. Any limbs that are dead, any limbs that are damaged, they've been broken by trucks driving by or whatever, and any branches that overhang stop signs, sidewalks, cars, should be trimmed up also. Crape Myrtle is something that instituted the regulations back many years ago. It was very common up until probably the mid-60s, where because crepe myrtles bloom on new wood, the procedure was just go in and lop them all off at about 6 feet. And you'll still see some areas around here that continue to do that on private property. But that was why the regulations were changed to not allow citizens to trim the trees in any way, because they were creating murder. And what that does is it ruins the natural growth habit. It opens up the top of the tree to pests and insects and disease, and it makes the tree structurally weak. We also, part of the program is as we're pruning, we identify any disease or dead trees back to Stephen's office so that they can go out, take a look at it, decide whether the disease can be treated or the tree won't survive whatever has infected it, and also any dead trees, and they'll remove those. The Master Gardener is part of the Virginia Cooperative Extension Office. I don't know if any of you are aware that there's a support system out there for anything that you have in the gardening area. fruits and vegetables and whatever, through the Cooperative Extension Office. Our program runs, and we're in partnership with the VCE to run these programs. We're dedicated to working within the community to promote gardening, promote tree cover growth, to promote healthy gardens within the city, and environmentally sound horticultural practices through sustainable landscape management. Our mission is to educate and improve the community through horticulture. The Crape Myrtle pruning program is only one of many. This slide says more than 25, but we're up to about 40 programs now that we, the Norfolk Master Gardeners, run. Everything from fruit and vegetable gardens at elementary schools and preschools, to our Speakers Bureau, where we speak at the public libraries once we're back up and running again, to we have a significant tree program where we're identifying trees within the community that need to be protected by the city forester. We identified those back to Stephen's office. And these are trees either that are extremely old and have made it through hundreds of years in the city, or extremely rare and happen to work within our city confines. We're always trying to identify new trees, better trees, big trees that we should protect at all costs. Crepe myrtles in your landscape. The biggest issue with crepe myrtles are there are several different cultivars, meaning several different types of trees. We saw in some of those photographic slides that there are trees that branch out that have hundreds or dozens of small branches at the bottom. They're typically lower in height to the big old trees that you see through many of the city locations that are nice over head trees. The good thing about all crepe myrtles, what I was going to say is, so you should, if you're going to plant a crepe myrtle, make sure that you see what it's going to look like when it's fully grown, and make sure it's planted in the right place. You don't want one of those that's kind of big and bushy in a small area where it will be confined. The good thing, though, the crepe myrtles are just very happy and healthy here in the Norfolk area. They're low maintenance, they're easy to grow, they like a sunny location, but they also do well in shade. Dwarf trees can be grown in containers. The shrub size, which is the one that I said that's sort of lots of low branches, can grow up to about 15 feet. And the tree forms, which are the ones with a big canopy overhead, grow 25 to 30 feet. So good for providing shade in your gardens, or good as a specimen plant in the middle of your front yard. Just make sure that you select a cultivar that works in the position or in the spot that you want to plant. They generally require minimum pruning. We use bypass hand pruners, lopping shears, a pruning saw, pole pruners. One of the other things that we encourage is, as you're pruning your trees and shrubs and moving from shrub to shrub, it's really important to disinfect your tools, because there are many diseases that reside on a tree or a bush that you can pass along to the next one. So it's really important. You can use a Lysol spray, alcohol spray, and it's just a matter of spraying off the blades before you move to the next bush. We also encourage you to keep your tool sharp and clean, no rust, have them properly sharpened. There are several guys that come out to the farmers markets that sharpen your tools for you, or typically the pruners can be sharpened with just a honing tool. The other thing is the cutting side of pruners and loppers should be against the tree to make sure that the cut is being actively properly activated. There's a 3-cut method for larger branches, which we'll show you during the training. That's where you cut low, and then you cut high, and then you cut in the middle, and it reduces the possibility of tearing the bark on the tree. There is a wrong way and a right way to prune, and again, we would certainly show you how to do that during the training, during the civic event. These are just some of the tools that we use. It's a nice picture. These are the loppers that I was talking about, the bypass printers, and the saws. Those are typically the 3 that we use. The city forester provides us with safety vests and eye protection and gloves so that we're protected when we're out doing the project. I'm not going to go through this because it's pretty detailed. This is a picture of a tree that has been murdered, and you can see where my cursor is here. There's sort of a big knot at the top of the main branches, and that's where it was just cut off level, and the new branches grew, and all of the flowers and all of the leaves are up here at the top. But these branches stay very thin and sort of undernourished because all of the water and the nutrients have to get up through that knot and make it into the branches. Makes for a very delicate tree, one that's very easily damaged. And that's what we're trying to prevent. This is a close-up picture of that one. So you can see how the branch here at the bottom is nice and smooth and typically would have a few branches up from the top, but because it was murdered and just cut off flat there, it's got all of these other branches that are coming out of the knot there. And they just become too heavy for this one branch to support. It's another picture of one. This tree is decades old. We can tell by the size of the base. Had it been left to grow normally, it would have been a nice canopy tree. But again, because it was lopped off, it made for not only an ugly tree, but a tree that typically could become very unhealthy. Again, this is what I was talking about with the proper way to prune a branch. So if these branches here had been cut off at the collar, here, the collar will grow over the stump. So it's ideal to get it as close to the base of the tree without cutting into the collar. And eventually this collar would have grown over and sealed up that whole trunk. As it is now, you can see by these splits, this branch is starting to die, it's drying out, and that just opens it up for insects and disease to get in, which will work its way in through the dry wood into the base of the tree and cause a serious issue. So one of the things that we do is we look for that as we're out on our pruning projects, and we'll saw this off, hoping it's not too late for that collar to cover the wound. The right way to prune encourages new stems to grow away from the center. It opens up the plant, it increases light and air movement, reduces potential wind damage, reduces insects and disease. And the suckers, or basil canes, water sprouts. If you can rub them off while they're young, then they don't become a problem. Otherwise, you need to prune them off with pruners. And this is just an example of the proper way to prune a typical crepe myrtle tree. You want to maintain an attractive framework. Remove the lower branches. These are typically the ones that might hang over a sidewalk, hang over a car, and any that are in the way or cross and rub other branches should be removed. This is another example of a good cut. You can see where the dying branch or branch that needed to be removed was removed, and the collar is growing over where that was cut. So that's a good. This is a bad cut because it was cut too low and the collar was cut off. So this won't grow over now. The collar is, on some trees, is very easy to identify. Typically the texture of it runs parallel to the branch itself. This one, the collar has been cut off completely. And so that probably won't ever heal. Another one where it was cut too far back, so they cut the collar off.
Ginger, I hate to interrupt. I do want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end.
Okay.
The residents. So if you had a
I'm
moment if you had any last slides you wanted to go through here. We can
again, yeah, I'll just go through them quickly. Bad cuts. This is the summary of the slideshow here. So it's a Master Gardener program. It's been suspended through COVID-19, but we hope to get it back up and running soon. You're into the citizens are encouraged to maintain the trees once they've received training from us. And we just ask that you contact us to set up a program. I did get a call today from Jim Affelt, who is one of your neighbors. He's also a master gardener, and Jim is very interested in getting some programs up with you guys later on this year when things open back up again. So we'll coordinate with Jim and make sure that he's part of that program. Again, as I said, we typically send out 10, 12, maybe even 15 master gardeners working in small groups for 4 to 6 neighbors that will come out, and we'll train them and show them how to manage. And I can make this presentation available to you, so you've got our contact information. Feel free to either send us an email or call us. Also, if you have dead, damaged, or diseased trees, we suggest that you contact Norfolk Cares and put in a ticket to have your tree reviewed. That ticket then goes out to Stephen's office. He sends arborists out to look at the trees to figure out what needs to be done, and he'll take care of it. By no means should you try to manage damaged, diseased, or dead trees on your own. Leave that up to the city folks to do. So I know that there was a question that came in earlier in the week. Excuse me. Anyway, it was, how do you get more crepe myrtles in to a park? And I had left that up to Stephen to answer. So Stephen, if you would like to take that.
Yeah, I'll
Ed,
jump into that. I don't know the exact context of the question, but absolutely we do have crepe myrtles planted throughout our park system. While we love crepe myrtles, we do are always trying to increase our tree diversity, whether it be specific species or genus, whether it be oaks and all kinds of different trees. So we don't go blanket plant, obviously crepe myrtles throughout the parks, but if there's, I'll echo what Ginger said as far as service requests through what used to be called the Norfolk Care System is now known as My Norfolk. So there is a app, Android and Apple app for that, and then a web page, of course, and then of course the telephone number. And you can always request a tree for planting in front of your property, or you could even request a tree for a park or median space nearby. I can't guarantee that we're going to plant that because we do select it. We look for right tree, right place, all that good stuff. But yeah, if you have a recommendation, please put it in and get it over to our office for tree planting request. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions. I know one other that got sent to me by Kate, I believe, was about planting at Jeff Robertson Park specifically. So I'll just address that one. Or it's also known as Bluebird Park, I believe, locally. So we actually did a planting there in early November with Garden Club of Norfolk for the Frederick Law Olmsted. If you haven't noticed it, it's as you come down past Wayanoke, the Audubon, and then you take a hard right into the park going up to ODU on the trail, and right between the fence and the stormwater pond, there was a planting of about 15 trees we did through there. And we also worked with Norfolk Master Gardeners, Garden Club of Virginia, and team of volunteers to kind of clear back some of the encroaching privet and some other invasive species to open up some of the trees that were actually planted as part of the stormwater BMP build out. But as far as more trees into the park, there are some other things that are coming up, possibly with working with without speaking for the Elizabeth River Trail Foundation, because I can't do that, and for our chief landscape architect. There's some stuff coming down the line with the trail, and then over in the wooded area, kind of going back towards Hampton Boulevard, that may present itself for some tree planting here in the coming years. So I'll just leave that question there. And I can answer any other ones. Scott, depending on how much time you guys have left for this segment. And yeah.
Thanks, Stephen and Ginger. Does anybody else have any questions for these two? Well, feel free to pipe in here. I would just say that if anybody's interested in getting a program going for West Ghent, I ask you to reach out to the West Ghent Civic League at gmail.com and share your interest. We have received interest in the last year for this discussion and the startup of the program. So please, if this has piqued your interest and it's something that you're willing to volunteer a little bit of time to help take care of our neighborhood, we would sincerely appreciate it. And thanks again so much for coming to speak tonight.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Once again, feel free to reach out to the Master Gardeners organization through the contact information that I provided. We can answer a lot of questions. We have a VCE agent that is specifically for Norfolk. Anything we can answer, we'll pass along to Stephen Traylor or somebody else within the government organization that can answer those questions for you. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so now we'll move on to Chief Boone and his team from the Norfolk Police Department. So I'll kick off this conversation by saying that the topic of crime and gun violence around the city is definitely the #1 feedback item that we get as a civic league in our relationship with the city administration. And it's something that is a fairly frequent topic of conversation, for instance, with Councilwoman Doyle and myself. Chief Boone, if you've noticed, he's been in the press a fair amount lately because this has been a topic in our city and around the nation and the region and everywhere lately. If you've been tracking the news, along with the other Hampton Roads area chiefs, has done a roundtable discussion on a few occasions. And in fact, last week, he just gave an excellent press conference discussing the Norfolk Police's latest initiative on getting the guns off the street. If you don't know him, he's a native of New Jersey, and he's been with our police department since 1989, and he's been our chief for the last 6.5 years. So who else better to discuss this incredibly important topic than Chief Boone? He's here and he's going to share what the city's doing both within the police department and share his insight about what's going on across the city administration. Chief, over to you.
All right, Scott, thank you for allowing me and my staff to attend this Civic League meeting. I want to also thank Councilwoman Doyle for facilitating me to get in here tonight. I have a couple staff members that's joining us. We've got Captain Johnson on the 1st precinct, in which the Ghent area falls under, as well as Captain Ray Aponte, and I believe Community Resource Officer Fentress is chimed in somewhere. But what I want to do real quick is give you a snapshot of the last 5 years since I've been chief and how we address crime, where we've been, where we're going, and some of the things we have coming down the pipe that surrounds violent crime and guns and partnerships that we have established and some that we're going to be doing in the near future. So when I became chief in December 1, 2016, I was fortunate enough to have served in the gang unit as a lieutenant. And one of the things I noticed while serving in the gang unit was that 90% of our crime is driven through gangs. That's just the reality. If you follow me and you follow the Norfolk Police Department, I tend to call balls and strikes. I don't do politics. I just tell it like it is. So one of the things I wanted to change in our culture was how did we go about addressing crime? So we have a crime model called CompStat. That is where we meet every other week and we discuss what's going on in the city with respect to crime and what specifically is driving crime. So it took us about 4 or 5 months to get everybody focused on gangs. For an example, vice narcotics would typically focus their reports on vice narcotics. Homicide investigators would typically focus their reports on homicides. Patrol would typically focus their reports on various topics. One of the things I wanted to do was synchronize everybody's train of thought with respect what drives crime in the city of Norfolk. So once we got everybody synchronized and focused on gangs, our crime for the very first year, 2017, dropped by 23%. That's overall crime. That was huge for Norfolk. In 2018, much to our chagrin, we surpassed 2017 numbers. So we thought we were on to something. So we continued the same process, focusing on gangs. In 2018, surprisingly, again, we surpassed 2017, 2018, and 2019. In 2020, we leveled out. A lot of the reasons why we leveled out, there's a multitude of factors involved in that. One was COVID-19. And two, we started to see the beginnings of folks leaving the law enforcement profession. Therefore, we could not implement some of the crime fighting strategies that we had been able to do in 2017, 2018, and 2019. So 2020 and 2021 has been very challenging for us, basically because of all those things I just highlighted. Manpower, COVID-19 is some of the things we had to do to work around that. The anti-police rhetoric, the George Floyd movement, the appeal of law enforcement not being as attractive as it had been due to concerns that, you may have an officer doing his or her job and somebody's video recording them. And, although it may look bad, particularly when you have to use force, they're using force as it relates to their training. But nonetheless, they were second guessed. So we had in June of 2019, a large amount of vacancies then, and they continue to grow, which kind of handicapped some of the things we were able to do in previous years. So I know shootings and homicides is a concern of all. And it was a concern of ours as well, even though crime was dropping every year, starting from 2017 on. One of the things that concerned us as an organization was the number of shootings, the number of homicides, because if your crime is down, I don't care what city you're in, if your shootings are up, that's problematic. One of the things we noticed in 2020 and 2021 and the start of this year as well is residential homicides have gone up. And what I mean by residential homicides is just that, folks inside their homes disagreeing with one another, and for whatever reasons, they resolve conflict with gunfire. Our first 6 homicides of this year, 5 of which were residential. One of the reasons that our homicides have gone up in 2020, 2021 is because those homicides are within close proximity. Residential, you're subject not to miss. And that's problematic. And it's problematic because it's happening in some of these communities that have always had a hard time dealing with conflict, but they've taken their conflict inside the walls of their homes and as crazy as it sounds, you have individuals shooting each other over a sporting event. That's unfortunate, but that's a reality. So I'm often asked, how do we compare to other cities? I never compare ourselves to some of our local cities, such as Virginia Beach, Portsmouth, Suffolk, and Newport News, Hampton, because they don't look like Norfolk. They don't. They don't look like us by population, demographics of population, poverty level, and challenges that goes with all that. Last year, Richmond closed out the year with 100 homicides. We closed out the year with 61. But a third of those were homicides that were residential with multiple victims. Anytime you shoot in close proximity, you're going to have multiple victims. So I say all that to say we have problems with guns, problems with mental health, where folks just don't give a damn and they are shooting each other inside their home over some of the darndest things. So here recently, we did a reorg. We were a 2-precinct model for the first 20+ years of my career. And at some point we went to a 3-precinct model. Now that 3-precinct model, we required us to hire an additional 120 officers. And when we know that, because in 2014, we did a manpower study. And under the 3-precinct model, there was a recommendation that we hire an additional 120 officers. Well, as you relate it to some of the previous things I said regarding manpower, that became problematic on top of the vacancies. So I knew that we functioned better, at least during my time, under a 2-precinct model, because at the time we did the planning to revert back to 2 precincts, we had just enough manpower to make it effective. It took a while to get it implemented, and during that time phase, we started to lose more people as well. And we can get into where people are going and why at the end of this. But I am convinced that we operate better under a 2-precinct model because of what I just said about the additional manpower we needed to run a 3-precinct model. But, you know, cops are cops. And what I mean by that, you give them, for the most part, a marching order, and they're going to follow it out. They're just going to do their darnest to make it work. So some of the things we are trying to do now to address manpower, to address how do we go about addressing violent crime. We've had, in the last 5 years, started tracing guns. You've heard me speak about guns forever. One of the things we did historically that just did not make sense to me, 5 years ago, if there was a crime involving a gun and we solved the crime, we recovered the gun, we merely placed the gun in abeyance. It was merely fruit of a crime. So we started looking into, okay, where are these guns coming from? Who originally purchased the gun? And how did this gun end up in the hand of a convicted felon or 11-year-old? So over the course of 5 years, the data has identified who's buying the gun, where they're buying the gun, how the gun ended up in some of our challenging communities in the hands of young folks, and convicted felons, etc. We've recovered over 4,600 guns. And out of that, maybe 300 guns were reported lost or stolen. That's significant. I want to underscore that. 4,500 guns, give or take, and maybe 300 were reported lost or stolen. There's no doubt in my mind, these are guns that were purchased legally, but they were very shortly passed on illegally, which is what we call a straw purchase, which is why I reached out to ATF. If you saw the press conference last week, we made it clear that we do a really good job on focusing on the end user. What I mean by that, the person that we come across in possession of said gun. We don't do as well addressing on those who's supplying the gun. That's going to change. The data that we've been able to collect has gotten the attention of many of folks that's responsible for helping to minimize this. And we have some initiatives that we are forming with respect to the region involving the FBI, ATF, DEA, and how we go about addressing violent crime, particularly gun violence in this city. So there's two pockets of guns. There are the guns that we come across in our day-to-day activity. You will be amazed at the number of guns that these officers take off individuals every day. Every day. I just got a report today. There's 7 guns taken off a group of people. And the thing that keeps me up at night is, you know, we are able to remove these guns without an officer involved shooting. That just goes to the credit of the women and men of this department to their training. But it does concern me, and we won't be that lucky that long before there is an officer involved shooting. So the pocket of guns that I just spoke about, we come across through our day-to-day job. And those guns are vastly underreported as lost or stolen. There's another pocket of guns that we come across that responsible gun owners, they report, okay? And they report at high volumes. So those guns, we don't typically come across as much because they're reported right away. And because they're reported right away, most folks that are up to no good don't want that gun in their possession. So the city, Dr. Filer and council, they're looking at bringing in a model, a ceasefire model to help offset some of the violence here in the city. And I'll just give you an example of what that looks like. There's a Newark, New Jersey model in which credible messengers, folks that have a influence in certain neighborhoods that are able to get information that we aren't able to get as law enforcement because they are intimately connected to folks in certain neighborhoods that have guns, that may retaliate, and they are able to intervene before we see some of these shootings and things of that nature. And during their intervention, whether it's in a home, on social media, or at the hospital, they present opportunities for these young people to do something else that we, when I say we, the police department, quite frankly, we don't have the wherewithal or the clout to convince them, but they do. That model is in the embryo stages, and it's worked in almost every city that has been implemented in. The challenge is it's sustainability. A lot of times when we start seeing things working, we give up on it. That's one piece. That's the community grassroots version of violent crime interrupters. Now, there's another piece, and this piece is more law enforcement geared. This piece involves the ATF, DEA, Commonwealth Attorney, the U.S. Attorney, as well as the FBI. We know in this city, in any city that looks like ours, there are a handful of people that drive the crime. Most of those people are on probation or parole. And the way this model looks, it's similar to the Newark model, but it's law enforcement heavy. We will identify those 60 individuals. I gave you a number specifically because that's how many it is. And we will call them into, it may be a federal court building. It may be a local court building. It will be in a structure where they will meet the chief of police. They will meet the head of the U.S. Attorney's Office, as well as other disciplines, ATF, DEA, FBI, and they will be given a warning. We know that you are driving crime in this city. You will be given an opportunity to do something different. And it's up to them to choose, I'm going to do something different or I'm going to continue with my ways. And if they should choose the latter, there is no negotiating. Whatever they've done, they will get all their time. This is very, very riveting. It will get attention. It will be the first time we've done anything like this in Hampton Road. So Norfolk is very unique in the sense that we are taking a model. We're taking a bifurcated model where one arm is law enforcement heavy, but we also provide opportunities for them to do something else. But in this particular model, we know who you are. We know what you've done. We know your rap sheet. In the community-based model, it's more of a prevention model. We know that you live in this environment and you're subject, not that you will, but you may see things that you may find interesting, and you may make certain choices based on where you live. We don't want you to do that. So this community grassroots model will take those before they actually become a member of the criminal justice system negatively. So a lot of times I'm asked, what can we do as citizens to support the police department? And, you know, I'll give you an example. You know, see something, say something. I know that sounds trite, but it's so true. Just before the holidays, I make it a habit. I give my number out, my private number, or my work number, I should say, to anybody. I do that because I see it as an opportunity to galvanize support and galvanize influence. So there was a situation, it was about 10:30 at night in one of our public housing areas, and a young lady texted me, and she said, "Chief Boone, I can hear them outside arguing. I think it's going to go bad." So she texted me about maybe 2 minutes later, "I heard someone say they're going to get their guns." So I immediately called the field commander. The field commander is the highest ranking person working that night on the street. And he was able to defer officers to that location. But while en route there, she called me, and you can hear the fear and the panic in her voice, and you can hear her children screaming. And she said, "The officers are here, but they're still shooting." So I had an opportunity just to speak with that officer, or that sergeant, I should say, and officers. And, you know, just as the young lady had described it, the officers pulled up. They challenged these young men while they were shooting. And we're talking about 6 to 10 feet away. And I commend those officers because legally, they could have used deadly force, but they didn't. And they were able to arrest 2 of the 6 men and recover 8 guns and rifles. So those are some of the things that keep me up at night. But that example of see something, say something, you know, she could have done the customary thing of calling 911. It might have slowed the arrival somewhat, but she called me and I called the field commander, who I know will divert our resources that the dispatchers may not know that are available to respond in a timely fashion. So my ask of you as a community, you know, support your police department. They work awfully hard, despite what you may hear or say. The vast majority are doing the very best they can. And I want to underscore, under some very difficult circumstances, I've never seen anything like it. But they're still here and they're still standing perpendicular to the floor, trying to do the very best that they can. So with that, I know there's a host of questions and I'm willing to answer anything that you're willing to ask.
Thanks a lot, Chief. I'll open it up to the floor to any of the residents here for any questions.
Yes, I have a question. My name is Lois Kircher. And Chief, several years ago, I went to a Citizens Police Academy. It's probably about 8 years ago. I don't know whether they still host it or not, but it was several weeks of going a couple hours every evening, and I learned a tremendous amount. Is the Citizens Police Academy still offered?
So we kind of put a stop to large gatherings because of the pandemic. Trust me, we cannot wait to this pandemic phase to be over so we can get back to some of our community relations programs and engagements, such as the Citizen Police Academy. Once the green light is given for us to continue with some of those things, yes, absolutely. We're going to continue to do such.
Well, I just want to reinforce again, it was extremely educational for me, and I loved every session I attended. Thank you for that, and I'll probably come back again.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Tell a friend.
Will do.
Chief, is there anything we can do, you know, in a restrained, you know, unrestrained budget environment or policy environment? What can we do to get the ranks filled back up in your police department? How do we attract that talent here to Norfolk to be part of the solution?
So let me give it to you with respect from the genesis. Historically, our police department, with regard to pay, we were either number 1 or number 2. Most times we were number 2. I'm behind Virginia Beach. And I want to say between 2017 and 2019, we fell to number 5. And it dawned on me, and I'll never forget it, June of 2019, we had 100 vacancies then. And City Council was ready to respond to that, but then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, there was very little we could do to respond to it. So that's number 1. We had the pay issue. Then shortly after that, we had the George Floyd issue that really negatively impacted the mindset of law enforcement. And then on top of that, we had the various protests that just, quite frankly, just wore us out. It just wore us out. And on top of that, there's been some disciplinary decisions that have been made very public in a national sense, that some police agreed with and some did not. And on top of that, this would be the last piece, we have changed in terms of our culture. We've become very, very heavy-handed with respect to community relations. As long as I'm chief, that's going to be part of what we do. And some officers, some don't embrace that. For whatever reasons, I don't know, and that's okay. So that's a hot bowl of soup with respect to, why our numbers are where they are. But I want to be clear with you. Our number one kryptonite was pay. That's a factor. I am very happy that council made some adjustments to the starting pay, but we still got work to do in that regard. There's a lot of things that's coming to this city. This city is vibrant. Everybody around Hampton Roads come to Norfolk, believe it or not, for excitement. The reason I know this, because when we have to enforce the law, most of the folks that we enforce the law against don't live in this city. You take some of the shootings that we've had on Granby Street, 9 times out of 10, they didn't live in this city. You take some of the people that we've arrested with handguns, et cetera, they don't live in this city. Because we've been somewhat progressive in how we go about conducting business, we also have opened up a Pandora's box for folks coming here to create havoc. I'll give you an example. There was an article online about stolen autos, and I think Officer Fincher is going to speak about this. The reasons our stolen autos have gone up so high, it's one, folks, for whatever reason, they're not locking their car doors and leaving it running. But number two, what I'm more concerned about is it's known throughout Hampton Roads that you can be in a stolen car and the Norfolk Police Department will not chase you. That's problematic because most of these stolen cars, these young men have guns, and they know unless we see them shooting actively, we won't chase them. So the issue with stolen cars is problematic. We really got to do something about that. And I foresee something coming down the pike very soon in which we can address that. But Scott, I know I went all around the bay to answer your question about manpower, but that also impacts manpower because these officers are trained to win. And it's disheartening when you train them in the academy for 9 months to win. And then you have somebody in a stolen car just, for lack of a better phrase, shaking it at them. And they can't do anything about it. And that just destroys morale.
Appreciate your answer. What do you think about, you mentioned in your press conference about opportunity, education. What can we do, in your opinion, in Larry Boone's opinion, what are the things that we need to go after there?
Well, so Scott, there are pockets in any urban city that's been generationally challenged. Same here in Norfolk. I mentioned earlier about our crime fighting tool called CompStat, where we analyze where's crime happening in the city and where are the challenges in the city. Those areas have not changed in my 30 years. It's the same areas. I won't highlight them because I don't like to say that for public consumption, but they're well known. And when you talk about underemployment, undereducation, crime, easy access to drugs and guns, those locations hadn't changed. And until there is, and I don't know the answer to that, Scott, but I will venture to say this, you know, the root cause is poverty. That, whether it's Philadelphia, Detroit, LA, that's the root cause. And until we are able to fix that, we're going to continue to do this. And I know sometimes folks don't like to hear that, and I don't say it to give an excuse to anyone, but that's a real reality that's going to require some very difficult conversations, and it won't happen overnight. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some time, you know. Yes, so that's my answer to that.
I have a question. Or I was hoping, you know, there's a, my name's Casey White. I'm a community organizer here, and I've heard you talk a lot about gun violence. I went to the gun violence forum, which was really, you know, interesting to hear what's going on. You guys are doing a great job in so many ways. This interrupter thing that you're just discussing is something I'm super interested in. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, you know, there's a lot of burnout, and, you know, there's a lot of community-based efforts. There's a lot of do-gooders out there that are out already interrupting a lot of these processes that are, you know, creating this crime. And I'm wondering what you're doing in addition to some of the crime interrupters that you're talking about, the sort of insiders who can give you a heads up before something goes bad. We as like community, there's so many community-based organizations that are just like moms who are out there pounding the pavement and like trying to do right by their kids in their neighborhoods. And how is Norfolk Police Department and the city of Norfolk working with the people that are already on the ground, sort of doing this work? Like, is there a component of that we can kind of add? Are there interrupters that are their peace officers? You know, is there something that we can do in that realm where we're kind of working more as a community-based model? I think you're saying, you know, a lot of these things are in the embryonic stage, but, you know, do you see any of that growing, and is any of that happening? Do you work with partners and in alliances that are good, that you would like to see more of?
Good question, Casey. So today, with respect to the law enforcement side of this violent interrupter program, we had a room full of folks from profit to nonprofit to clergy to law enforcement. These folks are committed. And when I say they're committed, they were giving an outline of what's going to be responsible, or their responsibility as it falls within their lane. And not only that, within the outline, what they have to do, they're going to be measured on your responsibility is X, what was your outcome? This was the first time in 30 years that I seen the true quintessential meaning of community policing. Everybody in one room surgically focusing on one issue that we have to repeatedly meet on to measure our outcomes. I feel very, very strongly about this process if folks are committed. So to answer your question, those various groups that are working in silos, we are now under one roof, and we now see the same picture collectively, and we're going to address it collectively, and we're going to meet monthly to see where we're going, what are our outcomes, and what can we improve upon. There were a lot of folks that wanted to be a part of this. Where we sit as an organization, we know those that are committed, and we know those that are trying to, there are some that are just trying to find a footing, not so much because their heart's in it. There are some that they're trying to find their footing just to benefit from it financially.
Mm.
You understand?
I
what I'm saying?
understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I
All
do.
right.
I do. And a lot
Okay.
of, yes, and funding, and I get it. And the burnout of time and that amount too. So, and if you'll just allow me one other thing, because you had mentioned straw purchasing and that being sort of like a real element of focus, because I think there's, there's something to be said for people that are purchasing guns for felons, people on parole, people on probation, people who can't access them, and then handing them off to these people. And so some like gun shop owners, I mean, from what I've researched, sort of have sort of come up with some ideas for helping that. Like say you're not allowed to use your smartphone in a gun shop, so that you can't shop for another person or take photos or FaceTime, or because, that's kind of a give. So I wonder if there's some policy or some activity around, fixing these little loopholes. Are there any other things that we can advocate for as citizens, to bring to council, or to sort of back you guys a little bit more about, what you need and what can be delivered, and if there's some simple solutions we can sort of help work out for you guys?
Yes, I think though it starts with the gun management, speaking with local and state police agencies, and how we can better control straw purchasing. We hadn't done that, okay? And you don't know what you don't know. And we are seeking, when I say we, the FBI, and how can we work together so that we can minimize straw purchasing? I will say this, okay? The more folks we start to arrest, not so much the end users, but folks that may be dealing in it within pawn shops or gun stores, we're going to put an end to that rather quickly, because those folks generally want to do business the right way. All it takes is one. All it takes is one. I will tell you this. We know for a fact that there are a couple locations where straw purchasing is occurring. And once we make an example of that entity, it will self-correct.
I believe, weren't you saying that like 99% of the guns that were reclaimed were purchased legally? Was that, do I remember that correctly? That
Yeah, most. So I go into a gun shop, Casey, and you own gun shop A. I go into gun shop A, and I meet the criteria to purchase a gun. You don't know me from Adam, but I meet all the levels, and I purchase said gun, and I leave the store and I give the gun to Brad. Brad may be a convicted felon, but Brad has the money and he's willing to pay double for the gun. That happens a lot. So what we need to do as an organization is find a better way to work with some of these gun shops. Something says to me, if we made a gun like a car, you sell a car, that car is attached to that next owner. That's not so much with the guns. That is almost a sure way to change some behavior. Okay, I purchase a gun and I sell it to Brad. I'm still stuck with it, although it's in Brad's name. If that gun follows each handler, we can put it into straw purchasing.
good ideas. Thank you.
Mhm.
Chief, I know we had another question via email earlier this week, and I wanted to share it here to let you answer it. There's been a lot of discussion about, we talked about your hiring, and I think that, emergency services or, folks are dominating the hiring board with the city. But one of the things that gets discussed a lot at these city council meetings is the recreation centers. Where are you at on that? I mean, should we be changing the, the pay grade of the people that are working at our recreation centers, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Scott, you're asking me to dive in a bit of politics here. Let me say this. All right. I would not want to minimize any youth opportunity to visit a rec center. Okay. I think, one, it's important that they have an opportunity to spend time in that space, so that they don't become a victim, wander around aimlessly on the street. But I also know on the other side of that, there are some rec centers that nobody visits. So, it becomes a cost analysis, where are the needs? There is some utility in some of our rec centers being available, but I can tell you there are some that folks just don't visit. And, with resources being what they are, you got to make, responsible decisions with respect to your finances. So.
All right, so we're running over time here, as I think many of you can see. So we have a last question or two for the chief. We do appreciate your time.
I learned a lot about crepe myrtles, though. I got to take care of those suckers. I'm serious. Yeah.
Chief, this is Courtney here. I want to say thank you for being here. You've done very well. This is a very good discussion. I very much appreciate your time.
We do actually have one for chat. I don't know if we want to take it now or if we'd like to take it over email.
I'll take it now. It's up to you guys.
Okay. This is from Vanessa. And how are vaccines affecting the current officers on staff with Norfolk Police Department in response times to issues across the city? She assumes that crimes and issues are addressed by priority. We have residents who want more attention given to reprimanding speeders along Hampton Boulevard and area neighborhoods. However, with officers managing the span of violent to petty crimes, how as a civic league do we manage expectations with our residents?
I'm going to hand that off to Captain Johnson. He was anticipating the question.
And it was actually vacancies, not vaccines. Sorry.
Oh, did you say oh my goodness, you're right. Sorry. You
That's
can tell what's
I
on
just
my
wanted
mind.
to make sure that
You
there
can
was,
tell what's on
yeah,
my
right,
mind.
exactly.
Okay.
I understand.
Well, David, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. As far as vacancies right now, the 1st Patrol Division is down a few officers, but we reallocated the resources that were given to us when the 3rd Patrol Division was broken up and given to the 2nd and the 1st Patrol Division. Right now, I have a full staff of community resource officers, and I have the assistance of the traffic division that can come out there and enforce the rules and regulations you have on Hampton Boulevard. I just need you to send me an email and let me know where the problem is at, and I'll be sure to take care of it for you. Let me give you my email address, and I also, like Chief Boone, like to give out my phone number, and I'm available 24 hours to you guys. If you're ready, I'll give you my email address followed by my telephone number.
Can you put it in the chat?
Sir?
Captain Johnson, can you just put that information in the chat room?
I'll see. I'm not a little technology challenged. Let me find out how to do that. But
At the bottom of your screen should be a little chat box. It'll say chat.
I got it.
There you go.
Yeah, just put that information there. And the last thing before I go, I just want the folks to really do what you can to help support this department, to help support the women and men that we're in a very dynamic city. This is a tough city, but this is a city that has broad shoulders, and we'll get through this. The initial question, I heard some of it, then it went out. I heard some about vacancies. Right now, we are looking at 180 vacancies, which is huge. But we have some very aggressive recruiting strategies going on to help buttress that. We've also started in which we are able now to absorb officers that are already trained. And I want to thank council for allowing us to be able to do that, because there was a time period where we were not. So we are doing our metal darnest to address these vacancies. We aren't the only city that have vacancies. I meet with the 7 city chiefs quarterly, and that's one of the things we talk about all the time. You know, you hear a lot of discussion about Chesapeake, Virginia Beach. Despite their best efforts, they're still at, some of them are 100 down. So this is not a Norfolk issue. This is a profession issue, and it's across the nation. And I think it's going to be this way until folks like yourselves start uplifting women and men of this department, in all departments, more so than we have. You've heard me say many times, we embrace police reform. In some cases is necessary, but I think we might have overreached to some degree. And I look forward to the opportunity where we're back where we were, fully staffed, because I know with everything in me, we do some dynamite things when we are fully staffed and healthy, and it does well for the mindset of these officers to know that they have the support of their citizens as well as their council for public consumption. That's it.
Well, thank you, Chief. Really appreciate it. And you did, actually, it was Captain Johnson that mentioned our community resource officers being fully staffed. And so at the risk of speaking after your boss and your boss's boss, I invite Officer Fentress to give a couple of tidbits here.
And by the way, Chief and Captain Johnson, we really like Officer Fentress. I just want to say that.
Ditto, ditto. Thanks, guys. Can everybody hear me
That
okay?
is yeah, that's overwhelmingly supported over from this area as well.
Well, I hope everybody's good. I don't have much to say. I just have 3 key points to touch up after. Last week during our task force meeting, we've had 3 reported stolen autos within 1 week out there in West Ghent, which is an extremely high number. It's a very rare occurrence that happens. So after going through them, one actually was just towed to another street for a parking violation, so that vehicle wasn't stolen. The other one had a missing key fob. And then the third one, I actually spoke to the victim, who said all the keys were accounted for. This person believes that the radius of his key fob was so close to the car it was able to start it. I'm still a little leery on the explanation when I spoke to this gentleman. Not quite sure, and had also reported a firearm stolen a week prior when he let somebody inside his residence that he wasn't too familiar with. So there was some chatter, I guess, on Nextdoor referencing that people were copying key fobs and possibly overriding vehicles, which this wasn't the case in these circumstances. So, second update, a lot of you helped me in solving and identifying the burglary suspect that was in the fall within 24 hours of the offense occurring through all your guys' video and stuff. That individual was finally picked up the first week of January in an outside jurisdiction and being held with no bond. So hopefully that gentleman will be going to court soon on those charges in relation, but he has finally been picked up. And then thirdly, please stay home if the streets are hard. I don't think my captain or my chief will like us playing bumper cars, trying to respond. And usually, if the streets are super bad, they only prioritize us to extreme level 1 and level 2 calls, high priority calls. So please just be careful. Stay home if the roads are bad. Other than that, I have no other updates in relation to that over the last 30 days, except that one pocket. The last thing I do want to say, I know Kate does a great job in putting out my monthly tips and stuff because I based it on your guys' stats. But that's the main way you guys can help the city. You guys know I keep stressing, like, I hate when guns are left in vehicles anywhere in Ghent. And it's because of what the chief has said. It's because I've had kids literally come up to me and say, I like money, so I'll go rummage through all these cars, I'll get the gun, and then I sell it. And these are kids that I'm trying to get on the straight and narrow that are in neighborhoods next to you guys, you know, where we're trying to make relations and trying to change the trajectory of their lives. And so when I've had kids say that to me, it becomes a huge thing for me. And I didn't realize how many guns were being stolen out of cars. It's a little tricky but there's quite a few that are stolen out of the cars in Ghent monthly. And when you keep adding that on month after month, it's a lot of guns. And when everybody's cars gets flipped because the doors are unlocked, 9 times out of 10, I've told everybody they're going to the glove box or the glove compartment, and they're either looking for a weapon or they're looking for a key. And so those are the biggest things and the main things that your neighborhood is affected by. So I know it kind of sounds mundane just saying it month after month a lot of times, because that's really the basis of most of your guys' issues, which is a great thing to have. I wish it was 0, but that's not the reality. But that's how we curb an overall issue within the city. So I just thank everybody that reads my notes that Kate puts in your all's e-letters every month. And if anybody has any questions for me, I'll be glad to answer them.
From chat, Kate asks, are gun owners held responsible in any way if they leave a gun in the car?
Yeah, so no, they're not. I've always said we need some type of legislation to hold the gun owners responsible. I mean, I own multiple guns, one's attached to service weapons, and I have other guns besides that, but they're locked in safes. I don't leave them in center consoles in vehicles. I just don't leave them in the box in the trunk. We have to be responsible gun owners, and I'm a huge advocate for that as well. But unfortunately, there's no legislation for that.
And by the way, city council cannot do that. That needs to be done at the state level. So advocate for that at the state level.
All right.
Thanks
Well,
a
I'm not
lot.
going to take up any much of your time. Everybody stay safe this weekend. And is there anybody on here that doesn't already have my email address or my cell phone number?
We've got them right here displayed on the
We have it on the
screen.
screen.
So yeah.
Okay, great. I was about to say most people have it, but just in case, contact information hasn't changed.
Thanks a lot, Officer Fentress. We really appreciate it. Okay, so let me just wrap up real quick. So a couple quick updates. One, we should thank Lawrence for his time as our treasurer, but Ryan Reese, who I believe was on this call, or he may still be on the call, has agreed to step in and become the new treasurer, and the board has agreed to, and so they're in the process of turning over right now. So welcome, Ryan, and thank you so much for volunteering with the Civic League. Next thing is just shout out to the 1300 block of West Princess Anne, definitely the merriest and brightest block in West Ghent here over the holidays. And 1300 Graydon Avenue was the best decorated house. Hope you guys enjoyed the videos that Kate put together announcing the winners. In case you haven't heard, we have a resident meeting feedback survey out there. We sent an email specific on this, and it's also in our newsletter and on our website. So if you're interested in shaping what we discuss, how long we discuss. So I note right now that it's like 8:30 right now, and we're still going. And it's because there's so many demands on what we want to talk about at the Civic League meeting. So if you're interested in keeping them to an hour, but maybe having them every month, we'd love to get your feedback and help steer the agenda going forward. You see in the upper left corner here, this is a new innovation for us. We recorded this virtual meeting, and we started a YouTube channel so we can save our videos, and folks that don't make the meetings live can review them later. So appreciate David and Kate for getting that all set up. Last, I have heard some feedback from everybody about traffic safety, speeders, stop sign runners, etc. on Redgate, North Brandon. And I say North Brandon, I mean really kind of like where Brandon and Brandon intersect there. So we're sharing that feedback with the city, and we're taking initial steps to figure out how we're going to address that. So more to come here as we communicate more with the city on that topic.
Hey, Scott, can I just add one thing on traffic safety? I've reached out to John Stevenson because I heard from neighbors, and I experience it daily. Matoka and Redgate, parking is way too close to the intersection, so it's hard to be able to take a right or a left because you have to go out into the ongoing traffic on Redgate. So I'm asking for the no parking signs to be situated further back so that those cars can't be so close to the intersection. Just FYI.
Appreciate that. The last one
Also,
is, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Scott. I just got Black Cat data back from a different part in Ghent within a speed complaint within the neighborhood. I've used it on West Prentice Land before in front of the West Ghent school, where we're trying to see, because people obviously change their driving patterns when they see my car and a radar gun sticking out the window. So if you can send me some block numbers, I'll send it to Officer Bon Jovi, who does all that data analysis, so we can see if we need to get a detailed traffic out there, and we can see what the speeds are consistently 24/7.
Will do. Officer John Bon Jovi, will do. The last thing I'll say is something that we can do for the community. I think many of you have heard the news with this Omicron spike that we're experiencing right now, and this is something that goes to the hospitals here. Like, the hospitals are full right now, and once again, and I really honestly throughout this entire pandemic, our hospital workers have been overwhelmed and they're really run down. So we're putting together a care package drive for the hospitals there in Ghent, and if anybody's interested, we'll put out details online in our socials, and if you are interested and you just want to reach out, just send an email to the Civic League email address, and we'll get everybody linked up and make something happen for our hospital workers.
Scott, can I add one more thing to the healthcare thing, given I work for Centera? There is a significant blood shortage, and I ask for those who are able to give blood, please do so. Significant blood shortage. Thank you.
All right, so that wraps it up for tonight. I apologize for it going over. I do thank everyone for being here, and I hope you guys have a great night.